in your background there?
It is the Ocmulgee River.
Nice.
Yes.
Very nice.
We are live. Look at this. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Anne-Marie, thank you for joining us. You know, I love Zoom. And one of the things I love about Zoom is as you are beginning a webinar like this, you can see everyone tune in, right? So, but one of the things I love about it too is I love seeing the call-in user, right? So thank you, call-in user _1 for joining us today. I wish I knew who you were, but thank you. I'm glad you're on the line there. So fantastic. This is going to be another great conversation this week. Will, how are you doing, man? How are you? It looks like you're in your favorite chair.
You know, it's reading hour with Will. No, that's fantastic. I wanted to thank you guys all for being here. It's fun. A lot of fun faces. Many of you guys were on a eTourism Summit Advisory board call yesterday too. So thank you for that. We're really excited to share that eTourism Summit is going to be live in 2020. We're going to celebrate our 21st anniversary of the eTourism Summit with 21 days of virtual meetings and then 2 live days in Las Vegas at the Wynn Hotel in October. So it's gonna be a big month focused on helping our industry recover and prepare for a fantastic 2021. So invite everybody to please take a look at etourismsummit.com, and we'll be starting to post some of the 21 virtual sessions, as well as some of the speakers that are gonna be attending live and in person at the Wynn in Las Vegas. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to a fantastic conversation today. This is a really, really interesting topic.
I feel like we need Michael Buffer. Like the moment you said live, and I just Michael Buffer just immediately goes in my head there, and I just transpose his face over your body as you're saying that. But again, welcome everybody. Ted, Shirley, goodness, good to see. So good to see your names tuning in. We got about 61 tuning in right now. And as we get started here, obviously there are many faces you may recognize and some that you don't. But a quick, housekeeping. If you're probably zoomed out right now, right? You're probably experiencing more Zoom fatigue than you are anything else. But for those that may not be as familiar, you do have an option there to change the way that you're viewing this. So right now, if you're in speaker view, then you're seeing me and my little window is highlighted, and it's probably way too big and on your screen. But if you change that to gallery view, you'd be able to see everyone, and you'd be able to see all of our smiles right now. And that tends to be a little bit better of experience as we are engaging with this conversation. So feel free to go ahead and do that. And then Janine, you're immediately right to my left, or on my screen at least, right here. So let me just start with you and introduce yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell everyone tuning in a little bit about you and how you're doing?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much. My name is Janine Edwards. I'm a partner with P3 Development Group. We are a boutique professional services firm that's located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We do a lot of different work, but primarily have deep experience in planning, research, and development, and work across sectors, which actually provides a lot of insights and a lot of value to our clients, working with the hospitality industry, but also in community development and economic development. I'm so excited about today's conversation because this is right up my lane, kind of that sweet spot between what residents and local folks are saying, and then also what visitors think. And so thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Love it. And Valerie, how about you? How are you doing? I love that background. Where is that, by the way?
Yes, this is the Ocmulgee River here in Macon, Georgia. We are in the heart of Georgia, centrally located. I'm Valerie Brantley with Visit Macon, Vice President of our Destination Marketing Organization, and I'm happy to be here.
Love it. It's so cool. And Steve, my friend, good to see you. You look like is that outside? Are you outside or something?
I am outside, yeah. I'm normally based in Pittsburgh, but actually doing a road trip over the next 10 days. So I'm in Santa Fe today, and I figured I would do it outside and take advantage of the nice scenery. Although the lighting's not so great, so apologies for that.
I'm jealous. It looks great, though. And Allie, thank you so much for joining us as well. How are you doing?
Doing okay. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Introduce yourself to those that may not be familiar with you.
Allie Daniels, Chief Marketing Officer from Visit Seattle, and you will see appearances from my friend Taco this time. This is quarantine cat therapy, so
I love it.
She likes to make an appearance.
I love it. Amrita, how are you doing, my friend? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Josh. Still admiring your beautiful home office and all those books that you have there. So for those who have not met me, I'm Amrita Gurney. I'm the VP of Marketing at CrowdRiff, a travel technology company. And if you see me, I'm actually not drinking pink champagne. It's actually a non-alcoholic sparkling drink, but I'm having a good time and really happy to be here.
That you
no
do not
judgment
have to
zone.
do
We
that.
wouldn't have.
I was gonna say, yeah, you didn't have to do that. You could just let us entertain that thought. Well, again, I'm so glad all of you guys could take the time and join us. Time is a precious thing, right? We're in the midst of just really challenging season of life. So even in appreciating seeing your smiles, and then it really is good to see your faces. And then typically, we're so conditioned, hey, how are you? Like our natural response was, oh, we're good. I'm good. It's good, right? But it's okay to not be okay right now, because this is a really challenging season of life for all of us. None of us are immune. And certainly, today in talking about how do we continue to survive what we're surviving, and specifically as we think about balancing the demands of our industry, as a DMO, as a travel company, as a someone looking to attract inbound visitation, grow visitor economies for our communities, obviously help our communities enjoy a higher quality of life, et cetera. That's hard enough as it is. But now we've got some very real pressing issues, from our locals, and understanding, local sentiment, and asking questions like, who are the right types of visitors that we want? Are we even open to visitors yet, right? Are we even at a place yet where we feel safe to invite visitors back, right? I mean, certainly it's nuanced, it continues to change, and we have, been experiencing a decade of the most incredible growth in our industry, right? And so this is a new normal, and that's probably been overly used. I'm intentionally staying away from the word unprecedented because I know there's many of us that have grown tired of that word. But here we are. We find ourselves in this space, and we're certainly all in this together. So thank you for joining this conversation. And Ali, I'm just going to toss to you to begin with, and why don't you just give us an update? Most of us on the call probably have been paying attention to the headlines and understand you more than others have been especially dealing with difficult life in response to COVID.
Yeah, as patient zero, location of patient zero domestically, I think we were hit the earliest and the hardest probably from all of this, which means we shut things down quicker. We reduced team size quicker. We had restaurants close faster, but really and I'm sure Valerie can speak to this as well, it did harness the community spirit a little bit more too, that we are in this together. We want to protect our neighbors. We want to protect our community as much as possible. So how can we do that the best way? And how can we make sure, and I think, we spoke about this before, but destination brand protection, right? We want to make sure that we are not the reason why this starts all over again. So I think we're ultra sensitive to when we do open, when we actively invite visitors back, and how do we help guide them? And, this is a very personal journey. Everyone has their own pace that they want to go, from a host to a visitor as well. And I think the biggest thing that we've talked about internally is just respecting that, and just making sure that no matter which side you're on, being ultra respectful of those on the other side, and just their comfort levels, their the safety that they want to. We have people that haven't left their homes really because of so many personal issues. So just, let people, this is their own journey. It's a personal journey through all of it. So being respectful of that.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you are bringing up just the tone and candor that you're speaking, because it is so easily to get divided around what side of the issue you want to be in, right? And that's just dealing with COVID. But when we introduce certainly, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, Janine, it's a whole, and now all of a sudden, it's a whole new type of a nuance to the conversation. So, and really, really easily triggered, I find too, whether you're looking on Twitter or you're on Facebook or you're on Instagram or whatever, social platform you're engaging on, and you find yourself, it's really challenging. Janine, what are you seeing as being some of the maybe even first fruits or first steps in facilitating this balanced, nuanced conversation?
Yeah, I think it's so important to one, recognize, I think Allie hit the nail on the head, that there are so many distinctions and differences that people have. And although we can oftentimes get really quickly to what matters most, I think just representing such a diverse perspective of audiences and differences, it's important to make sure that this is an ongoing conversation. So what we've seen primarily here in our own backyard is that there has been an opportunity that has never existed to bring all types of, I would say, non-usual or unusual suspects to the table to have conversations across difference, to lift up what's most important to everyone. And that's, of course, that our economies thrive and that we are able to get this economy moving in the right direction. People want to get back to work. But I think as we keep moving forward, it has also created an opportunity for us to maintain that table and maybe pull a couple of seats up to the table that weren't there before. So we're seeing a renewed interest in bridging divides across community, across sectors, across industries. And that's a really positive thing. And I'm hopeful that it will take us into the future to be able to collectively build the destinations that we really want.
And you may have said this earlier, but I'm not sure. But I mean, you're in Milwaukee. You're talking about Milwaukee, one of, I think recently, right? You're voted or named or declared the most segregated city in America. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And so it has been for us, I would say for many, a rallying cry to use this as an opportunity to turn the perception that many have about Milwaukee, to turn that around. There have been over the last 10 years, many grassroots efforts. And so I do think that the DNC spotlight has created an opportunity. And so many of the organizations that we partner with are dealing with the issue head on. Even yesterday, I participated in a corporate conversation around racial equity. That hasn't happened here ever before. So to be able to recognize that now is the time to put those issues front and center, I think is really a good thing. And so I'm hopeful.
That's great. It's very encouraging actually to hear you speak about it that way too. Valerie, I know there in Georgia, you guys have been in the headlines for a while too, as one of the first states to kind of open up. What are you seeing on the ground? How are you seeing visitation kind of come in, and are you seeing anything distinct about what your destination is experiencing right now?
Yes, so for visitation, we, have read and have seen, and what we've been discussing with our partners, it's definitely more of like some of the panelists have said earlier, people who are coming in, it's based on how comfortable they feel. It's a little bit of a closer drive market than, what we have typically seen in, months prior to COVID. And so we've just been working, with our partners, and the message that we have been communicating is that we're here when you're ready to visit. We want to not only want to make people, feel that way, feel comfortable, but then also in communicating what precautions, the partners who are opening, what they're doing, to just really have that as more of a ground level based messaging, because we know that if people, when they feel comfortable to come, then they will find, what our destination and many others have to offer. So it's just, maintaining that message of we're here when you're ready, this is what we have to offer. And then when you're here are some of the safety and guidelines, precautions that are being put in place by our partners.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, when you're here, right? What to do, because, sorry, Amrita, did I cut you off there?
That's okay. It's always hard when there's a bit of a lag. I was just going to jump onto something Valerie was saying. Go ahead.
No, please do. Please do.
Yeah, I think, Valerie, you bring up a really interesting point around how what visitors want and what residents want. I know that right now there's a lot of conversation around this being really in conflict with each other, when I actually am seeing a lot of similarities. Like we know, for example, even from a communication point of view, locals want to know what's open and what's not open and what is safe. And visitors want the same thing themselves. And I was just looking today at some new research that Destination Analysts published just this week that was saying that when you look at the people who want visitors, there's a strong correlation between locals who want visitors are the same people who are comfortable going out in their own communities. And so where before I think there was more of that separation where DMOs were really looking more outward at bringing in visitors, I think DMOs have a really interesting role to play right at the center, bringing these two different groups together.
If anything, like we were talking, you know, on our call Monday as we were preparing for this, you know, one of the things that I heard you guys say is not to come across as, you know, with a lack of empathy, but if we could name or point to a silver lining, perchance, you know, it is in identifying and realigning, right, with perhaps an often unlooked audience, which is our locals, right? Something that we often ignored for a long time, right? And we've heard that on all of these webinars, right? But that is something that is kind of been, you know, renewed, right, in what we're going through now. I know, Steve, you have seen similar things, and with TripAdvisor and what you're doing on your, you know, the Travel Safe initiatives, you're seeing that same kind of balance being struck, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a great point. I think DMOs have pivoted so rapidly with the launch of COVID to sort of this new role that they've had to play. And that has created some potential goodwill that hopefully lasts quite a while, actually, for the destination space in general. And Ali said it so well, you know, it is about making all these various groups feel comfortable. And I think information drives that comfort. And so, you know, when your residents know what you're doing to communicate to visitors about how they have to behave, or what the features and services are in place to make those travelers feel safe, those are the same things that are going to make residents feel safe. And you mentioned our Travel Safe initiative. Last week, we launched this effort to sort of coalesce all of the different practices that are being implemented by businesses, by destinations, so that travelers have that information at their fingertips. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm on a cross-country road trip, and that has been critical to me to understand what's a business doing, what's a restaurant doing, so that I can feel safe when I go there.
The DMO being set up, again, we would say, you know, those of us on the call, many of us have been on the DMO side, and you know, so we understand a little bit of, you know, the inner politics and dynamics that happen locally in a place, right? But the DMO as a single source of truth, as the you know, information vehicle, right, that continue to put ourselves in this situation. I love you talking about bringing up a few other chairs to the table, right? I love that metaphor, because I think prior to this, when we're experiencing growth after growth after growth, record-setting number after record-setting number, it's like we get really complacent. It's easy to grow complacent when everything looks to be good. Meanwhile, there are probably some things that weren't so good. We just weren't necessarily paying attention to them now, you know, but now we're given the opportunity to pay attention to them. One of which being this local sentiment and inviting more chairs to the table with more partners, creating more partnerships with organizations perhaps we didn't work with before, right? Valerie, I'm only imagining that as small businesses are trying to survive there in Macon, that more are rising to say, raise their hand, and that you're able to see and identify and come alongside than you previously were before, right?
Right, absolutely. We, you know, during this period have had an opportunity to partner with organizations like the United Way and others who have offered relief funds and getting involved with fundraising to be able to help our local businesses and organizations through this difficult time, whereas that partnership may not have developed before COVID. And so, you know, I think what's going to be exciting, you know, moving forward is how are we able to maintain these relationships and these partnerships, because we know that the effects of what we've gone through is going to continue for some time. And so finding ways to be able to continue those partnerships are going to be really critical, I think.
One of the cool things too, sorry, just on that comment, I think one of the cool things too is that those partnerships probably don't need to be limited to within your own community or state. You know, 61% of travelers say they're going to take more road trips. So what kinds of opportunity does that create for partnerships that are cross-border, cross-state, and regional in nature too. So I think there's, you know, what is it they say about the necessity is the mother of invention? I think that we are headed into a period of really cool innovation, and that creates opportunities for sort of new partnerships that we might not have considered previously.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Will, I'm going to toss to you for a second, because I think, you know, as someone with as much experience as you in this industry, you have seen the way destinations have either chosen to work together or, more probably frequently, not chosen to work together in the past, right? And so now you do see, though, I think, at least I've heard it, Steve, to echo you, I've heard the same thing. I've heard a more willingness or a more willing spirit to think about co-ops and think about coming back to the market in some kind of media opportunity or something like that. What have you heard along those lines?
You know, I think it brings up a great point, but and it goes to kind of the localized nature of what we're dealing with, and we know we're going to be coming into a more regional travel cycle, and that's kind of the nature of the beast. But I really like the point that necessity is the mother of invention, because typically, and I'll go back to like after the Gulf oil spill, and all of a sudden there's all sorts of money on the Gulf. Everybody's got money from BP, all advertising in the same markets with this generally the same message, and basically ultimately just, you know, rising the price of the media that they were buying. They're bidding against each other rather than cooperating and working together. But we're starting to see regionalized approaches, and I think a lot of that is driven by smaller budgets. I mean, we know budgets are going down. How can we be most impactful? And a lot of that's by working together, and it breaks down some of those barriers that are generally political in nature. You know, you've got a city council or a county commission that wants to make sure that all their money's coming right back to them, whereas us travelers don't really care. We don't recognize borders. So I think it does open up a cooperative spirit. And much like Valerie was saying, I think there's a time now that if destinations focus on building partnerships that can survive in the good times, this could be an extraordinary opportunity, and not just partnering because we have no other choice. So I think if destinations that focus on building a partnership that lasts through the good times, and that means it's a true win-win, then I think you have a real opportunity to see some really strong partnerships coming out of this.
Mm-hmm. I think also on that note, you made me think of a conversation I was having with Travel Oregon, where they have really been front and center in communicating to their locals and to visitors around basically, you know, what you can do or what the reality is in Oregon right now. And I think they really reinforce that DMOs are the ones that have that great destination branding role and experience, similar to what Ali was saying. And they can communicate in a way that really, you know, is resonating in a very different way, and not just sort of sharing the dry facts. And I've seen so many examples from, you know, off the top of my head, like Visit Omaha, Travel Oregon, Visit Tampa Bay, people who are doing really creative things to make people feel safe, build up traveler confidence, make locals feel good, and do it in a way that really fits with that destination brand. Because we know that I think more and more locals are going to be a big part of the destination brand. And it's, you know, maybe they've been a little bit more in the background before, but I think this has also shown how DMOs can be the ones to tell that story in a way that I think a typical, you know, city official is more likely to kind of stick to the facts. And even when you look at their websites, it's like lists of things, whereas DMO websites are really visual and beautiful and have lots of stories in them as well.
And I think we all had to pivot a little bit when this happened. Like, we became a resource for locals, right? Like, who's offering takeout, who's doing delivery, and just how can we provide benefits to our partners, but also within our community. And I think, like to Steve's point, just remaining positive and realizing that this is a situation that has never happened, and it is giving us a chance to try new things. And my goodness, we're in hospitality, right? We should be looking for those partnerships and bringing seats to the table. That's what we celebrate, and that's what we're all a part of. And I think, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only destination that locally people don't always understand what we do or that we even exist. And this is giving us a chance more than ever for people to understand the power of travel and tourism and what it does bring to the community and how it does support local businesses. And, you know, it creates this new exciting environment And I think this is giving us an opportunity to share that in a different way that we've never been able to share before.
And Amrita, you bring up something that I think is really interesting. That's a real beautiful role for state DMO, that collaborative efforts.
I'm
I
losing.
lost you there, Will.
Yeah, I think we're losing Will. But whatever it was, it sounded great.
Totally. Can you say that again, Will?
I agree.
Just a great opportunity for state DMOs to reinvent and create those co-op partnerships in these times, and building bridges between destinations that otherwise were probably looking at each other within the state as competitors. Now collaborating and using that state level as a real opportunity, I think, to add a lot of value to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of their, I think many of us are hearing this, that, people's travels are starting regionally. And so I know many states may have had different plans for the year, but are now earmarking part of their budget to really start by promoting that regional travel within their state. And then, like you were saying, Steve, also find opportunities to, I think it's a great idea to think about, there's many people, one of my friends, I was just watching her road trip on Instagram through, California and Arizona and like multiple states. And, that's her road trip. It crosses state lines. She doesn't sort of see this as like this DMO, that DMO. To her, it's her road trip.
We've got I love this. By the way, those tuning in, feel free. You can drop your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. But Kelly's got a great question. I'll toss to the panel here, to you guys. Other than letting locals know that we are getting the community rules out to visitors, what other suggestions are there? I think that's a great question. We were talking about this earlier, though, because how do you manage safety messaging, cleanliness messaging? What does that look like in fun, creative ways? But again, you're stewarding, this balance of visitation and what to expect on both. What do residents expect, but what do visitors expect too? What are you guys doing or planning for right now?
I'll start off we work really closely with Visit Milwaukee, our local DMO. And I think I've just been so proud of them, in particular, how they've stepped up to do a lot of heavy lifting to help build the capacity of some of the restaurants that we have local, to help them with their websites, to feature on their website, not only what's open, but also a lot of really cool stories about how those restaurants have been responding to the pandemic. And then because of a lot of the local protests that we've had, there's been a big pivot that our local DMO has really focused on to create with our Common Council something called an Active Streets program, which is really to try to engage retail, but also other business to share what that footprint is, but also to expand that footprint into neighborhoods that would allow for people to see those physical connections that oftentimes we locally usually don't lift up. So people can see beyond just the traditional downtown footprint. All of that has been really helpful in trying to help get everyone rowing back in the same direction. All of that, though, also has been aligned with what we've seen from our local health department. And so it's just been a really coordinated effort to make sure messaging is all specific but aligned.
Mm-hmm. I think also, to the question, I think educating visitors is certainly part of it. But to Ali's point, I think this is a really nice opportunity to remind people of all of the positive things that tourism brings as well. And so, there can be a local perspective on that. You may have businesses, we all have businesses in our destinations that are very directly impacted by tourism. And so, put those people in the spotlight to really share what tourism means for them, so that locals don't see this as being, again, in conflict with their own interests. And I know many years ago, Visit Iceland or Tourism Iceland, they had this issue of over-tourism. And so they also had to balance these needs, but for different reasons. And one of the things that they did, which was super creative, was they created this really great series of videos and actually a certification called their Tourism Academy, I believe. And you could actually get a certificate if you watch these videos on how to be a responsible tourist. And so again, I think DMOs can address some of these issues in really unique ways that maybe someone in a more traditional city role would not really have the means or even the background to be able to do.
Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Janine, you mentioned, telling stories. And one of the things in the research that we've been conducting since the start of the pandemic that consumers have sort of said again and again is what they want to hear right now are positive stories. So, taking those stories, and Amrita, you mentioned it from the business perspective, but I think even from the traveler perspective, what
Yeah.
brings them in the community? Why are they there? What are they doing while they're there? That actually has a way to sort of showcase the very qualities that sometimes we take for granted as residents of a particular community, those factors that actually attract travelers. So that might be another way to sort of come at that storytelling angle from both the business side and what travelers mean to them, but from the traveler side and what the community, what your community means to them.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, of course, like, at CrowdRiff, we're looking at user-generated content all day long. And even through this time, we've seen lots of travelers post, prior photos of visiting a destination just to sort of show their love. Or, we've all had, we participated in this travel through memories hashtag for a while where you post all of your vacation photos. So I love that point, Steve, that I think that our travelers themselves, many of them really, they love the destinations that they're visiting. We've all had those experiences, and I think their joy can be really infectious.
I want to kind of introduce this. Andrew, I really appreciate your comment in the chat here. I want to toss this. I think it's, we would be remiss if we didn't, talk about this. I know we talked in our prep call, we did kind of, dialogue around this. So I don't know who wants to necessarily jump in here about this, but Andrew brings up a good point that there is a divide, there is a disconnect, in other words. And I know in southern destinations, especially, we're seeing it around masks. Do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask? Is there a local ordinance to wear a mask, et cetera? So, Valerie, I don't know if you want to speak to that, or Steve, I know from you see this too from your vantage point, but how do we deal with this? How do we respond to it?
I think that one thing that's really interesting is we're kind of set up a little bit of a conflict. And I think Andrew's question is really, really interesting in that how do you balance resident sentiment? And I was talking to Amir at Longwoods, and you think, his resident sentiment index is going to be a must-have, and in terms of understanding what communities want. And by the way, Amir, it's his 50th birthday today, so happy birthday out there. So what do residents want, and what we want to be safe and know that we're in a safe environment. And then, but when you marry that with the actions on the ground, and what I think Andrew was mentioning was, you go to Northwest Florida, and you're gonna, it's gonna feel very, very similar. You go to Myrtle Beach, it's gonna feel very, very pre-COVID. I mean, people that are traveling are not necessarily the ones that are really concerned about the masks and everything else. And it reminded me of a conversation, Josh, that came up on this on one of our earlier webinars when Martin Skoll came up with the Sparkloft study and said, are Republicans going to save the travel industry? Because there was this survey that said that they're less likely to be afraid of traveling. And somehow New York Times got a hold of that and started calling around and called me yesterday to ask that same question. And, I think that it's not Republican or Democrat or South or North or urban or rural, but clearly the people that are more likely to go out to a restaurant are going to be the people that are more likely to want to go traveling. The people that are going to go to a local attraction are going to be the ones that are most likely to go, the longer haul first. But we have and I think Allie mentioned it at the very, very beginning. I mean, but still half of us, regardless of where we live or what our political affiliation is, are still very, very concerned. And it depends, and that's more geographic or, where the hot spots are. And then the areas that don't really have high levels of this, like my little town where there's, been, very, very small numbers. So you have this really different psychological component. And I think DMOs and marketers collectively are going to really have to think through how you can be kind of proactive with one, but really respectful of the people that aren't ready to travel, and certainly the people in the community that don't want stuff coming in.
I think you also have to be, the challenge for the destination is that they have to be authentic to the destination as well. Mm-hmm. So, whatever whatever the mindset is and the rules that are or are not in place, the destination has to decide, and that's not just around COVID, that's also around racial equality and that issue as well. The DMO has to decide, one, is it merely the voice or mirror of its community? Is it a leader within its community that maybe that sees its role as helping to change the conversation or not? And I don't necessarily know that any of us can say what the right answer is for any one particular DMO. But if you're a destination, and to Andrew's point, my destination isn't he's not saying his own destination, but a destination isn't really focused on the social unrest. For the DMO to go out and create the perception that they are focused on this issue would actually be a disservice to the DMO, to the visitor. And I think they're going to have to sort of do that calculus within their community, because they also don't want to attract a traveler who is very focused on safety to their community if maybe the community hasn't had high incidence, and therefore their attitudes around COVID-19 are very different. So it is going to be, I think, a little bit of a balancing act in figuring out what is authentic for the community that you're in and the visitors that you're speaking to.
Well, and my goodness, it's hard to be patient right now, right? Like after a month, you're like, oh, I can hang in there a little bit, but especially, for our destination, summer is it, man. Like this is when we don't have to invite people normally, because people tend to come to Seattle in the summer. So being patient is hard, but also like we've tried to be purely educational, right? There is a county nearby that put out ads saying, please don't come. Like, we love that you love us, but please don't come right now. We don't want you. We need to like protect our own. And I thought, what a bold, but like good for them to be really honest about what they need. And again, everyone's going at their own pace, right? They wanted to make it very public that they're not ready. So we just passed, starting next week, it will be like, you have to wear a mask in public. Like that's done. So that helps us a little bit too. I think when it comes from above, I know to Andrew's point, like knowing that there are, because we don't want to be patient anymore, we want the visitors or we want the customers, is that we should kind of let them lead. But I think we have a responsibility as a destination that we can't do that. Like we don't have that luxury right now. We really need to educate them on what the safety protocols are here and give our partners kind of that backup that we support you and we want you to remain safe. And we're creating a spot within our website of here are all the places that are following all the safety protocols, and here's what you need to do to respect that and be a part of it too, so that you can be welcome. So I think it's hard not to make it subjective, but it's nice when there are rules so that you can say, no, this must happen, or you're in trouble.
For us and our destination, and since we don't have any type of mask ordinance, really for us, what we have done so far is really just being a place where people can find on our website all the information about what our partners are doing for the guidelines, and really just in communicating that, and then really putting the onus and the, back on the visitors or the locals about whether or not they feel or want to wear those masks out in public, and depending on where they go to visit the attractions and all of our different partners. So, since we, again, like I said, don't have an ordinance in place, it's really, we have taken the approach of just being a place where people can come find the information about what guidelines are in place on all of the places that are around town.
I think I would just say that, and this is just an addition, but it's a huge opportunity again for a cross-sector conversation. I think that there's significant resource around marketing that's being spent to communicate around COVID from public health departments, healthcare organizations and institutions. What we've seen in the Milwaukee area is that there is a tremendous amount of resource that's being poured into the education around COVID. But there is also an opportunity to co-message, especially going back to the importance of that story and what those compelling images look like. So it creates a tremendous opportunity. We just finished working with our Medical College of Wisconsin locally, and really took a lot of cues from what other organizations and DMOs were doing to ensure that that was not just a siloed message. So how do you leverage the resource that currently is being put into marketing and advertising? And there is an opportunity, although it's a fine line, I must agree, but there's an opportunity to at least have that conversation and co-brand.
there's no easy solution here. Like I almost feel like as y'all, each of you are talking, I'll just, for myself, I just go, man, the tension kind of, it's hard. All right. I mean, it's hard to know. We much, Allie, like you said, it's a lot easier when we know there are rules to follow and it gives us some cover. We understand a little bit how to move forward, but there is a sense in which it's tricky. It's tricky to understand how to balance the sentiment, how to communicate. Who do we, and then of course, what does that impact downstream? How does it impact, the actual messaging we're going to produce and create and put in front of people? Which I think,
say, Josh, a lot of my off the record conversations with DMOs has just been like, this has been so hard. It's so hard to get it right. I think a lot of people, even on a personal level, have expressed moral dilemmas around what's the right thing to do, because I think we all want the economy to be strong. We all work in tourism. We want all of us to have good budgets and to be able to do the work that we do and to create all these jobs. And then on the other hand, it's like Allie was saying, it's a very personal story. What some of you may have had COVID, some of you may have a loved one who's had COVID, or you may have other reasons to be more concerned. And so I think that's probably the common thing that I've seen is that, DMOs are in such a public role. But it's not a black and white situation. It's a very complex situation, and it varies so much from region to region and even within a state, depending on what the sentiment is around that particular community.
Well said.
Yeah. It's, I love, we want our jobs back. We want our restaurants to thrive. We want our small businesses to breathe a little deeper, to not be having to deal with the anxiety of knowing, am I going to make it another week or two or another month, right? I mean, those are all they're not just existential, those are real, so and I think what we see too, at least as consumers, as media consumers, we observe how easy it is to misstep and then be called out for a misstep. And so that adds a whole new complexity. So as a DMO, it's not easy. This is not easy. So, and I don't know that we necessarily we're putting forth this webinar and trying to schedule it and say, hey, we're going to have the answer, attend this webinar, and you'll walk away with your 1, 2, 3, tips, ticks, trips, and, techniques or whatever, you know what I mean? But really just to kind of foster this conversation and go, gosh, what are we learning from each other, right? And hopefully continue to support each other. What are you guys seeing there? What are you seeing there? And that's why we so appreciate all of you being here and everything else. I know there was a great question. I'm not trying to pivot away from this, but there is a sense too, as many DMOs are dealing with the fact that they can't exist anymore, right? They've had to cut staffs. They've had to completely rethink and retool. Steve, I see your comment to Kim there, which is great. And I think as we are even thinking about moving ahead, in many cases, we see that corporate travel, business travel is probably going to lag behind a little bit. We think, recreational leisure travel, transit's kind of coming back first. And, Allie, you were talking about how so much of what you were thinking is really in 21, next year, and trying to plan about, oh, okay, so these things where we were positioned for it, right, we've had to toss those out, and now we're having to rethink. And of course, we're all finding ourselves in that situation. But even how we staff our organizations and the skills that we need, and the internal capacities versus what can we rent or what can we hire or whatever it is, you know what I mean? All of that is changing, and as we continue to pivot. We use this word pivot, but it's not a single thing. Right? We're having to continue to do this. Would you invite us into that just a little bit? Because, as patient zero, what you guys are dealing with and thinking.
Yeah, it definitely makes you reprioritize, right? As our destination, we lost 57% of our staff, and everyone that's left is on a very reduced schedule. So you can't do everything that you used to be able to do, right? Budget or not, you don't have the manpower to do it. So it really is making you look at this more holistically and look to the future. I know we kind of talked about and diversify your funding sources. But it is making you, back to the finding new partnerships, right? How else can you provide value to your community and to the community that you serve, so that those aren't hard conversations in the future? We were lucky enough to fight for and win some county tourism recovery funds that we're working right now on the plan for. And that's giving us a whole new opportunity to show our value to our county council members that, you know, sure, they understood a little bit about tourism before, but it's giving us, you know, we get to go past the tourism 101 with them now, and about how seasonal we are as well. And it's just a whole new opportunity. And I think, you know, remaining positive and knowing that this is a year like none other gives you a whole new perspective on things. Yes, it sucks. No one's doing it. No one is okay right now. And I think acknowledging that, but also using that, you know, in a new way, exploring your backyard, staycations, all of those things that, while they sound a little cliche, Travel and Leisure just launched a report about how, you know, exploring in your neighborhood is so good for your stress level and for your happiness, right? So encouraging that piece and knowing that locals are going to be the first, that's the first ones we're going to talk to about getting back. Knowing that there's also this community aspect to it, like put money into our economy first, you know, support your neighbors, support those that have been there for your weddings and your, you know, graduations. Those are the people that supported you and hosted you during those times. So let's give them a little love too. And then we'll start bringing people in from, you know, the neighboring counties and further and drive markets. But I think it really is, it's a opportunity to give your home a little more love and attention than you would normally.
I love that you mentioned that. I want to, and you know, get to this last question here, and then we'll kind of take any additionals. But I love that you mentioned support those that support you, and you talk about that. And you know, anecdotally, the first restaurant my wife and I went to, this was like maybe a couple of weeks ago, was the restaurant that catered our wedding. Right, that was the first place when we could do takeout. That's what we said. That's where we went, right? And we you know, gosh, when in normal life we probably go there maybe once or twice a month, right? But when the opportunity came, that was the first place we went, and we were like, yeah, we want to support them, right? Those are great.
It's personal.
Yes,
yeah, it's
totally.
Really personal.
Totally, I love that. So we got this question about trust, and I'd love to kind of invite all of you to contribute to what you think and how how can the DMO. I have said this for a while, you know, the most important thing that the brand, DMO brand especially, can be doing through this time is really building into the bank of trust as much as possible. That is such a huge asset. And you know, consumers, after all, we remember, we pay attention to when we feel like mistrust has been sowed or something like that. So as we think about DMOs establishing trust during this crisis for both locals and the potential travelers, I think even Andrew's question kind of touches on this too a little bit. It gets to the trust issue. What are some practical things that you guys are doing, and what are some maybe helpful ideas that those attending right now can take away?
Well, I think I'm unmuted, so I guess I'll start off by just saying that I do think that there's a tremendous opportunity to invest in the relationships. I do think that this, at least in Milwaukee, I think when you brought up, Josh, this point around segregation, I feel like we are hyper-focused in this area around diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are a lot of conversations about that, but in our work, we know that that begins with how much relational capacity you actually have, and that it is a function of not just the one and done, but literally understanding that you're in an evolving relationship that's across partnerships, but that also is one-on-one relationships. And so we are encouraging at every level of leadership for there to be more authenticity, more one-on-one conversations, understanding how difficult that is now that we're all on Zoom, but that also creates a tremendous opportunity to reach out to many others that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's where we're leaning in and sharing that broadly with as many people as we possibly can.
Anybody else you want to touch on that?
I mean, you mentioned it, Josh. I do think it comes back to that topic we were talking about earlier, which is authenticity. And I think I would add to that transparency. I mean, I think those are two of the ways that you build trust among whatever audience, whether it's residents or travelers. I think aligning yourself with other trusted entities, either within or outside the organization, is another way. You know, we're sort of known by the partners we keep, right? By the friends we keep. And I think that's important as well in establishing trust. And then, of course, doing the things that Janine said.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, oh, go ahead, Amrita.
I was going to say, you know, over communicate. I think this is a time where people just need to know very current information about what is happening, what's real, what's not real. And I always look at Destination British Columbia as being, you know, one of these DMOs that just seems to do a great job of communicating. And so when you look at their, you know, their social media accounts or their website, they're just super clear about what the situation is right now. I think New Orleans is also doing a really great job as they sort of, you know, figure out how to, you know, change what visitors look like and mean for their city as well. So I think this is the time to really step up and speak up and be a trusted voice, like many of the others have said.
And I think allowing for conversations, right? You can put something on a website and someone can read it, but also, hey, if you have more questions, reach out to our concierge, or we use Twitter as a virtual concierge, and we've got someone, you know, ready to answer those questions. But I think saying that we're here, there's a human behind all of this, and we're willing to answer your questions on a personal level. So yes, you can find everything in our FAQs, but also like kick them to someone to actually have a conversation. Is, you know, just opening yourself up to that, it helps build that trust and authenticity, and that you want to have a dialogue.
Yeah, I like that.
And to build on to what Ali said, I was definitely going to also mention kind of the personal touch, you know, more than just the email, picking up the phone and having phone conversations. Whereas, you know, kind of before pre-COVID, we would kind of take for granted of maintaining those relationships through electronic communication, through email and things of that nature. But really just taking the time and just extending, you know, services, not necessarily asking for something in return, particularly with the local businesses and things like that, but just reinforcing and reiterating, just letting them know as an organization that we're here to help them in any way possible that they may need help.
I love that. I could not agree with all of that anymore. I mean, which is risky, right? To make yourself personally available is a risk. That is taking a risk for sure. But it is the surest way, right? To establish trust, connection, and everything else. I love that. It's really great. Quickly, we got another, you know, question here from Wendy. I want to, I think, you know, perhaps Ali and Valerie, maybe you guys could speak to this more directly, you know, literally on the ground with the DMO, but this is a part of the conversation as we think about balancing this, you know, striking this balance with a focus on local. Are you getting any kind of pushback from your, you know, hotel partners or anything like what is that? How update us on that for you guys?
Yeah, for us, we have not gotten any pushback from our hoteliers and attractions. I think we have done the work beforehand to really, you know, within the last couple of years, communicate on a local level how tourism affects our economy. And because I think our message is getting out there on a local level, that people are starting to really understand that. And then, you know, they see that we're communicating responsibly, you know, just the guidelines and reinforcing that and all of that. So we really haven't received a lot of, you know, pushback from that. And I think because of that, moving forward, that will allow us to continue that message to them, and they see the impact of what tourism. So I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of pushback from that.
I totally agree. Same situation, no pushback yet. I think there's also this acknowledgement of locals understand our rules and our comfort level more than visitors too. So it helps them like get back into this re-entry phase that everyone's going through. So, and you know, a diner and a room night booked, they don't really care what zip code they're coming from right now. I think just knowing that there's new signs of hope that business is coming back, and they've been really supportive and know that, again, we don't want to open too quickly and set this whole thing back again and be in the same situation next summer. I think everyone knows, like, the more patient we are now, realistically, next summer might look a little bit different. So while it's hard to be patient, they're really understanding so far.
Yeah, no, that's good. We've just got a couple minutes left. Any other closing thoughts, Steve or Amrita or Janine? Any brilliance you want to leave us with?
Oh, now that's tough. I was about to speak, but then you had to throw that out there.
No pressure.
Yeah, right, exactly. I will just say that, throughout all of this, again, we have seen just continued passion for travel from travelers. So I think that while our business has borne perhaps an outsized impact from all of this, people's desire and prioritization of travel hasn't really waned through all of this. We still see travelers saying that they're spending 5 hours a week planning travel throughout this pandemic. We still see, 82% of travelers talking about they're excited for their next trip. And that's not just in the US, that is like every country that we survey. So, as we get closer towards that level of comfort, and that's why we launched that Travel Safe initiative, really was to let people know these are the practices in place so that you can feel secure in travel. They're dying to get out there. So I think that, as Ali said, a little bit of patience, but I think that when things really open up, the crowds will be there, maybe socially distanced, but they'll be there. So.
I think this is a tremendous opportunity if we are able to think about it in that way, to do a lot of the work that is necessary to carry us all forward. And so in certain ways, we've been talking a lot about rethinking inclusion and redefining welcoming. And that primarily for us has a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens on it. So what are the resident voices that need to be at the table for the long haul? And do we have a ready reference of residents who are ready to be engaged for the future? And then also just around the welcoming, I think we've talked a lot about the importance of making our spaces welcoming, but then how are we creating a sense of belonging for the residents, and hopefully that translates and you're able to build from that energy. And so we're prepping for the future and doing that in a very intentional way, recognizing that relationships take a long time. And we talked about trust, but if you want to build that pathway to trust, you have to stick at it for quite some time.
That's good.
Yeah, my main thought right now is that I think of this as the great reset. It's a time for people to be asking themselves, what kind of visitors do you want to have? How do you make the visitor experience really in harmony with locals so that they actually are excited to have visitors and see them as being a really healthy part of what makes their community vibrant as well. So I love the work that you're doing, Janine, and Valerie, you were saying around a lot of the personal relationships that are forming this time through just the necessity of needing to lean on each other. I hope this is an opportunity to just make some bold moves that may have been harder to do before because we have the opportunity.
Fantastic. Will, here we are again, man. We find ourselves at the end of an hour. These conversations have just been so rich and full of life and encouragement. And, I thank all of you guys on this call, on this panel today. Thank everybody for sticking out with us. For those of you that are tuning in still, thank you. And there will be a follow-up email you'll get. This has been recorded. It will be posted, so you'll be able to share it with colleagues or anyone else from your organization. And Will, any closing thoughts for us today?
No, I just want to thank all of you. What an interesting conversation, and one word that comes out that I think we have not talked about for as marketers and as you guys are all leaders in this space. We act with such confidence and always assured of that we're doing the right thing for the right reason for our community. We're all charging forward, but it's really good to see the vulnerability and that's one word that has kind of come out of all the conversations is we're in a changing time. Our DMO world is going to look very different when we come out of this, but not just the COVID, but the diversity challenges and we've had harder conversations this year than we've ever had. And I think I heard from all of Ali. I mean, it's very, very personal stuff. And so the fact that you all gave an hour, not only this hour, but the prep time as well, really means a lot, because I think it is going to be really refreshing that all all of our partners around the country and that are on this call from around the world that that not being okay is okay. Not having all the answers is okay. We're going to work our way through this, but I love that everybody here is talking about starting with community first and community goals first, and then building what the new success for your community looks like, and how tourism, which it will play a huge role, but it will be a different role. But I think the good news is people are going to recognize that tourism is incredibly important to our communities, but the way we do it, the way we manage it is going to be different. So thank you all for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I loved the conversation. I look forward to continuing this as we move forward.
Yes, likewise. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Sammy.